Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief at pharmaphorum. I'm here at ASCO 2024 in Chicago, and I'm joined by Mike Petroutsas. Mike is the new, just 2 months on the job, U.S. President, Head of Commercial for Astellas Pharma.
Jonah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today.
Love this energy. It's always great to be ASCO. Chicago this time of year, can't beat it.
Yeah. So you're new to Astellas, so not new to the business. You came over from GSK.
Yep, 2 months ago. Prior to that, I was heading up their oncology and specialty business.
So tell me a little bit about, well, let's start with what you're here to talk about at Astellas. What are your big presentations, your big papers here?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for asking. Thank you for having us. Look, this is my first time at ASCO with Astellas, but I believe this will be the best year we've had. We have 16 abstracts, so we're excited about that. That's the most we've ever had. And if you look at our 3 strategic brands today with Xtandi, we have the Embark data, so we have some more subcuts of information that we're sharing. We have Padcev, right, our ADC, which is on its way to blockbuster status and helping patients with bladder cancer. So we have additional data being rolled out of our 302 trial, that's our frontline trial. And then we have Zolbe, which we have some great news. Recently we shared with the FDA, has accepted our application and have a new PDUFA date of November 9th for Zolbe. So we're just excited to share a lot of information and data with those 3 amazing programs.
Is that an initial clearance for Zolbe, or is that a new indication kind of situation?
No, so we filed.
You filed it. Okay, you're waiting on it.
Yeah. And we were just waiting for a new PDUFA date, which we just shared that we have.
Oh, great. So what's the new date?
November 9th.
Okay, great.
And that's for gastric cancer.
So tell me about how sort of Astellas has got to this point where you've got an unprecedented historical number of abstracts here. Is it just a lot of parts of the pipeline bearing fruit at once? That's something about kind of your strategy and the way that the space is changing.
So it's a great question, and I'd be remiss not to also share part of the 16 abstracts is also Zospata that we have for AML. So a couple of things, and it's probably one of the major reasons why I joined Astellas, which is our unique commitment to not only oncology, but to focus on targeted therapies and targeted therapies with high unmet need. And one of the things that we're able to do is not only bring programs like hopefully zolbetuximab to market, but also continue to look at subpopulations, because sometimes when you bring a product to market, right, you have an FDA approval, but you realize you need to generate additional data to see how we can share whether it's both safety and efficacy, a broader patient population types. And what we're also doing is starting to look at real world data, not only clinical trial data, but partnering with our providers to see where our drugs are used and how we can take that real world data and show it and share it with all the physicians here.
That's really interesting. I know that's a big topic of discussion is real world data. Where are you with that? I mean, have you released any data based on that, or are you in kind of working on?
Yeah, so we're working on it. We haven't released anything yet, but if you look at a program, for example, for Xtandi, for prostate cancer, that's a program we've had in the market for over 10 years, right? Very successful, everyone knows. It's a blockbuster drug, significantly changed the course of the disease. But there's a lot of data that we can work with our providers to see where it's been used, what the real world outcomes are, what the impact has had to both the disease and safety of our patients, and also look at it by demographic, right? Also look at it by potentially race and ethnicity. So that's where it's sort of the subcuts of data that we're working at to share. So more to come on that, but it's definitely an exciting area and field that I know physicians are waiting for.
What do you think are some of the big storylines so far out of the conference? Not necessarily just about a particular drug or a particular readout, but broadly speaking, what are some of the mechanisms of action, some of the therapeutic areas where the most action is happening?
So being biased to targeted therapies, because that's our area of innovation and focus, I think looking at programs like zolbetuximab, where you're targeting Claudin 18.2 for a specific gastric tumor, I think for me, continue to pick up energy. So like really targeted therapies. But I'm sure you'd agree, ADCs are the buzz, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's through the M&A you've seen in our industry or the success of programs like Padcev, everyone's talking about ADCs.
So you guys have an ADC. That's one of your papers. Tell me a little bit about the history there. How long have you guys had that drug? Did you develop it internally? Did you bring it in through an acquisition?
Yeah, so that's actually a partnership we had with Seagen. So that's a program we've had over the last 2 years. And actually, since Seagen was bought with Pfizer, now it's a collaboration with us and Pfizer. And that's a relationship we've harvested and have seen great success. because we also partner with Pfizer on Xtandi. So we've had it for about 2 years. It's in bladder cancer. It launched in second line, and last year we were able to launch it in first line. So it's a short period of time, but it's not only a great program because it's shown response, which is what we need in these patients that have such huge unmet need, but we're also studying Padcev and other tumor types like head and neck, like lung, and hopefully we'll be able to replicate those results and bring another option to patients.
Great. Yeah. So this notion of moving from second line to first line, moving therapies earlier. I know that's been a kind of a conversation of through line for the last few ASCOs. Is like these drugs, these new technologies are working so well. How can we start to use them at the moment where they'll have the best impact, right? Tell me a little bit about kind of your philosophy around that.
Look, I've had the opportunity to serve patients and work in oncology for quite a while now through 3 different organizations. And the common theme is when you do have an active program, the earlier you move it, the more benefit patients will see. But the reality is a lot of the unmet need is in later lines of therapy. So when you do have an active molecule, you do have to show a proof of concept early. And that's why you see studies in later lines of therapy, because there's a high unmet need. Plus, it allows you to show that proof of concept early, coming out of phase 2 before you bring a broader development trial. So would it be ideal for us to focus on having a first-line trial from the beginning? Absolutely. And that's hopefully what we're all shooting to get to. But we're trying to balance that with what patients need today, because unfortunately, the progression and the overall survival of those patients is not great in many of these tough to treat tumors. So we try to bring it to them first and best.
And of course, the later stage you are, the more likely you are to sign up for an experimental trial. So those are easier to fill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Recruitment is an issue. And honestly, Jonah, post-pandemic, recruitment is a challenge our industry is dealing with.
Let's talk a little bit about innovation. AI is a big watchword. We heard a lot about AI this morning in the plenary.
Yep.
What are you guys sort of, we just mentioned clinical trial recruitment, which maybe is a great example, but what are some of the areas where Astellas is looking into AI, looking to use it?
I would say when I think of AI, and it's talked about in many industries, I would break it down in pharmaceuticals or as a manufacturer in 3 different ways. There's the development part of the AI. How do we use software technology to identify patients in research, right, that are going to be responsive to certain programs better than others? Then there's the part about development. How do you help recruit for trials? And then there's also the commercialization, which is part of my responsibility in the US. I would say from an AI perspective, commercially speaking, it's more about how do we improve our operations to get medicines faster to patients? Things like omni-channel marketing, right? We're used to that traditional model of a representative going seeing a doctor. Well, that's probably not how we operate today, and it's probably not the most efficient manner. Now, there will be cases where we do need to be in front of physicians, and that still matters, but the reality is their time is becoming less. So finding ways to get content to them in the channels that they prefer at the time they want to see it is critical. And then also operationally, patient services, right? How you engage with reimbursement, patient support programs, rebate programs, patient assistance. How do we make that more efficient so when a patient is prescribed the medicine, they're able to get on therapy fast and not have to worry about it? So it's a little bit different on commercial how AI impacts us versus the research and the development piece.
Yeah, that's really interesting. With a targeted therapy, I mean, you're dealing with a subset of a patient population that's really going to benefit from this. So you've got to have the other pieces there, the diagnostics, to identify those patients. You've got to make sure that the doctors of those patients know about your therapy. I mean, what are some of the challenges around that aspect of what you do?
You know, that is the number one question on my mind, Jonah, at this meeting. So we've obviously shared we have a new PDUFA date for zolbetuximab. And as you know, it's a Claudin 18.2, right, targeted therapy. But there will be a diagnostic associated with it. And the reality is how institutions manage diagnostics versus the community is different. So we need to find a solution that's going to meet both of their needs. And also, even though it's the piece of the targeted therapy that's beneficial is you get right to the patient, right to the target to get a good outcome. Unfortunately, targeted therapies are most likely dealing with patients in ultra rare diseases, and they're really hard to find. So there's also an education piece. So what I'm trying to understand at this meeting is how does our team prepare to educate, right, physicians and patients about seeking targeted therapy? And then once they're seeking it, how do we get the proper testing where they're going to be seeing their physician? And then how do we train nurses and physicians to execute against that? So it's complex, even though they're great treatment options for patients.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces there. I assume it's another area where big data and AI could be helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've got one question I want to ask. I've been asking everybody, so if you're watching these videos, you'll know what's coming. What advice would you have for a new young professional starting out in oncology? Right now in this moment.
Wow, it's a great question, Jonah, and I would say be curious. A lot of times we get into oncology because we want to help support patients, but also we fall in love with our programs, right? You work in your organization, I work in mine, and we fall in love with what we have and we're creating. But come to ASCO and be curious, see the possibility. I met with a physician earlier today, and we talked about the complexities of targeted therapy versus chemo, and how do you get to a place where you no longer have to use chemo. And I really turned back and said to myself, look at all the biases I bring to think, is that even possible, right? Because it's been the standard of care for years. And it just reminded me, you have to be curious. You have to come to ASCO, listen to the science, be curious, and learn and see how we can, not individually help patients, but even collectively. And that's where great partnerships kind of come into play. And that's also another thing you can benefit here from ASCO.
Anything else on your mind or anything else you want to draw attention to or reiterate?
I would say in leaving, I'm excited. This is my first ASCO, but I know it'll be Astellas' best with 16 abstracts, and hopefully have an opportunity to just help many more patients ahead, whether it's prostate cancer, bladder cancer, GI, or AML. So thank you for the time, and I appreciate this opportunity to be here.
Thanks so much for chatting with me, Mike.
You got it. Thanks, sir.